So I will call to order the THPRD Board of Directors meeting for May 11th, 2022. Jessica, can you please call roll?
Tia Ping.
Here.
Heidi Edwards.
Here.
Barbie Miner.
Here.
Felicita Monteblanco.
Here.
Alfredo Moreno.
Here.
All right. And then before we start this evening's board meeting, we had another unfortunate and tragic event that happened again to us. So I just want to begin tonight's board meeting by asking for a moment of silence in recognition of the loss of Milana Lee. She was a 13-year-old student at Conestoga Middle School, and her body was discovered yesterday along the West Side Trail. It's so terrible. It's a heartbreaking situation, and our thoughts and prayers are with all her family and loved ones and friends, and with the Beaverton School District community. So if everyone could just join us for a moment of silence before we start our meeting tonight. Thank you, everyone. All right, so as we move forward, is there any actions resulting from executive session?
Yes, there is. I would like to move that the Board of Directors authorize the acquisition of land in the northwest quadrant of the district for the price discussed in executive session, subject to the standard due diligence review and approved by the general manager.
This is Heidi. I'll second.
Felicita Monteblanco.
Yes.
Barbie Miner.
Yes.
Heidi Edwards.
Yes.
Alfredo Moreno.
Yes.
Tia Ping.
Yes. All right, and then we have a few proclamations this month. So our first one will be on Water Safety Month. Is everyone ready? All right, so whereas individual and organized forms of recreation and the creative use of free time are vital to the happy lives of all community members, and
Whereas education, athletic, and recreation programs throughout the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District encompass a multitude of activities that can result in personal accomplishment, self-satisfaction, and family unity for all, regardless of background, ability level, or age. And
whereas the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District recognizes that swimming and aquatic-related activities relate to good physical and mental health and enhance the quality of life for all people, and
whereas the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District is extremely proud of our swimming facilities, aquatic programs, and other related activities, and our contribution to providing all ages a healthy place to recreate, to swim, build self-esteem, confidence, and a sense of self-worth, which contributes to the quality of life in our community.
Now, therefore, the Board of Directors of the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District does hereby declare the month of May 2022 as National Water Safety Month, and do encourage all those in the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District to support and promote this observance.
thank you, everybody. Our second proclamation this month is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So I will start off. Whereas THPRD is committed to creating safe, welcoming, and inclusive spaces that serve, invite, and belong to everyone, and
whereas today, nearly 74,000 people who live in Washington County of Asian or Pacific Island descent, contributing to the social, economic, and cultural fabric of our community. And
whereas the Asian American and Pacific Islander community in Washington County is incredibly diverse, representing people from more than 20 unique countries of origin, including China, India, Japan, the Korean Peninsula, the Philippines, Vietnam, and more. And
whereas THPRD respects the heritage and cultural tradition of all people and recognizes the privilege and responsibility of serving our diverse community. And
whereas Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month is an occasion for honoring our shared humanity, celebrating cultural stories, and commit to accountability advancing racial equity.
Now, therefore, the Board of Directors of the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District does hereby declare the month of May 2022 as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and do urge all those in the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District to support and promote this observance. Thank you. And then our last and wonderful one is Jewish American Heritage Month. Whereas Jewish Americans have been an important part of the American story and have greatly contributed to all areas of American life and culture since our nation's earliest days. And
whereas on April 20th, 2006, the federal government proclaimed May as Jewish American Heritage Month, stating, as a nation of immigrants, the United States is better and stronger because Jewish people from all over the world have chosen to become American citizens. And since then, proclamations in support of Jewish American Heritage Month have been made by presidents of the United States annually. And
whereas generations of Jews have fled to the United States in search of a better life for themselves and their families, and these immigrants made invaluable contributions in support of equality and civil rights through their leadership and achievements. And
whereas there is a need for education and policies that are culturally competent when describing, discussing, or addressing the impacts of being Jewish in all aspects of American society, including discourse and policy. And
whereas we celebrate the rich and diverse heritage of the Jewish American community.
now, therefore, the Board of Directors of the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District does hereby declare the month of May 2022 as Jewish American Heritage Month, and do urge all those in the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District to support and promote this observance. Thank you, everyone, for great proclamations. Okay, so moving forward, we will continue with committee liaison updates. Does anybody want to go first?
I'll jump in. This is Barbie.
Thank you, Barbie. Go for it.
Sure. I would just like to share. I was happy to join our joint advisory committee a couple of weeks ago. It was wonderful to see such a full representation as I've got to meet some more folks from the other committees. And I think key takeaways, it's exciting to see the collaboration that's happening with our joint district with the city of Beaverton. We had a nice brainstorming session with everyone, kind of discussing what perhaps we would like to see coming from this upcoming downtown park potential collaboration. So it was wonderful to have some representatives from the city of Beaverton present and to hear from, again, our volunteer committee members. I think the other piece I would like to just highlight and make mention is, and I'm not sure if others have this on the docket as well, but we do have an opening on our audit committee. And I thought this would be a wonderful place to just encourage and support us to leverage our networks as best as we can to get the word out. It's a wonderful way for folks who might be interested in participating. It's, I think, 2 meetings per year for our fiscal. So just reminding everyone that we do have that opportunity with the audit committee as well.
Thank you. Lisa?
yeah, I'll just share that President Ping and I, plus Aisha and Doug, had 2 great meetings with Congresswoman Bonamici's staff about some funds that we would like to continue to do great work around electrical vehicle plugins. Sorry, y'all, I'm tired. It's Chicago time. I'm a little out of it. as well as community outreach. And I'll say that those meetings went pretty well. I think it helps that we continue to maintain a relationship with her, our congressional leader, as well as her staff. I also think that, we're awesome and we do great work. And so this staff came up with 2 wonderful projects to highlight and submit. So we will hear back, it sounds like in a few weeks. So please cross your fingers. Very much related. It is voting season, y'all. So whoever's listening, please vote. I just heard that Washington County has an 8% voter turnout. That's pretty sad. So there are important elections. I just want people to vote. So please vote. Staff too. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi.
I will go ahead and piggyback on the please vote and just remind folks that your THPRD board here, we have endorsed the upcoming bond measure for Beaverton School Districts, so measure 34-313, and hope that all will participate and vote in support of that bond measure, which will replace repair and modernize local facilities within Beaverton School District, of which we, with THPRD, have the honor and privilege to share many of those facilities, fields, spaces with the school district. They're one of our greatest partners. So looking forward to the opportunity to vote for that, vote yes, and your board has endorsed that along with a number of others. I'll also add to that, had a chance to attend the Washington County Preschool for All pre-referral committee meeting recently. And so a lot of work has been done over this past year and some to prepare to move to the ballot in November of 2022. A preschool for all focused initiative. And there's within this meeting, and I sent this to my peers here. We had some really good early polling to show that a good 60+% of folks in Washington County are feeling in support of such a proposal to provide preschool for all for 3 and 4-year-olds. There's a lot of questions right now as to the revenue mechanism and the breadth and the expansiveness of the program. Will we start with 4-year-olds or include 3-year-olds, or how comparatively might we do that to what Multnomah County has been doing, and what that looks like. So the upcoming meetings in the next couple of months will really focus on defining the funding mechanism as well as the scope and size of the program. And if folks have questions, I'm happy to answer any and have the slides out to you. So if you want to take a look at those, they're very informative. In addition to that, it was great to be in another budget season and to be able to attend our budget committee, I think, as we all did, and to be able to see how we can move forward in a fiscally responsible manner and recover from the effects of COVID and restoring, the great work that we've been doing all of these years. So thank you to our budget committee volunteers for participating in that as well. And I believe we're meeting in a couple weeks. That's it for me.
Thank you. Alfredo?
Yeah, I've got a couple things. First of all, I wanted to thank the staff, my fellow board directors, and everyone for your grace and patience as I moved my family last month from lower South Beaverton to upper lower South Beaverton. But we are move is complete, and especially the meetings I've had to cancel or be late for. I did want to recognize the great effort of the Park Foundation, who had a spring giving week in mid-April and raised $8,500 to continue to, further our mission of access for all, and be there when the district has needs that it or the community has needs. It's a hardworking group of people. I'm always impressed by what they're able to do. So I wanted to give them a shout out. And the final thing I wanted to say is, I was struck by as we were reading the National Water Park, the National Water Safety Month proclamation, thinking about, our welcome centers and the work that we've done. I remember we got feedback from a community member in Spanish that mentioned that because they were able to have someone walk them through and get signed up for swim lessons, that was going to have an immediate impact on their feeling of safety, during the summer boating season and things like that. So I definitely wanted to call back to that work and connect those dots. So awesome job, everybody. So thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, we will move on to consent agenda. Do I have an action for that?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as submitted.
I'll second. It's Barbie.
Thank you. Jessica?
Alfredo Moreno,
Yes.
Heidi Edwards,
Yes.
Barbie Minor,
Yes.
Felicita Monteblanco,
Yes.
Tia Ping.
Yes. Okay, moving right along, we have unfinished business, general manager's report with Aisha and Peter.
Yes, thank you very much. We'll just get that there. All right. Good evening, members of the board. My name is Aisha Panis, your Park Services Director, and tonight I'm joined by Peter Swinton, our urban planner, and we are here to talk to you about the ongoing comprehensive plan update project. And we'd like to share with you where we're at, as well as solicit some feedback from you on where we are headed with regard to the goals, objectives, and the guiding principles. So on this next slide, I'll just do a quick reminder of the planning framework that we are working within. And we really start at that highest level, which is the Vision Action Plan, which was what our community members told us they wanted THPRD to do and be in the next 20 years. And so we take that vision and now we're refining it down into the comprehensive plan, which talks to us about what and how we consider in achieving that vision. So what are the goals? What are the objectives? What are our guiding lights, our guiding principles that are going to be taken into account to deliver on that vision? And then subsequent to the comp plan development, we'll also be looking at a much more shorter term horizon document called the strategic plan, which gets into detailed instructions, timing, and really takes into account the budget picture, our 5-year CIPs, et cetera, for the things that we intend to do over the next 3 to 5 year timeline. So let's see the next slide. What you have on the screen here is just a reminder of what our goal areas were coming out of that community vision process. We identified 4 of them, and they are, of course, welcoming and inclusive, play for everyone, preserving natural spaces, and accessible and safe. And these are the product of the thousands of ideas raised by conversations with 12,000 people, I think, 12,000 ideas, 10,000 people. And so we're in the process of refining these items now. So on the next slide, I think we move into greater description. And for this, I will turn it over to Peter.
Thanks, Aisha. So for each of the following 4 VAP goals, staff working groups identified objectives based on themes within the VAP's 108 actions, and then developed guiding principles for each objective. The welcoming and inclusive goals focus is primarily external and is about building community and eliminating barriers to participation for our patrons. As a result of these objectives, THPRD may take additional steps to serve English language learners, like we have with our new, more personalized approach to Centro Bienvenida and the deployment of our Pocket Talk translation devices. Next slide, please. The Play for Everyone goal seeks to reflect all the ways that people want to play and interact with THPRD. And as a result of the objectives you see here, THPRD may work to provide childcare while their caretakers participate in classes and create sports equipment libraries for our patrons. Next slide, please. The Preserving Natural Spaces goal is about environmental stewardship and better connecting our patrons with natural spaces and education. As a result of the objectives you see here, THPRD may work to expand access to THPRD nature centers and nature mobiles, work to become a leader in responding to climate change, and promote more equitable access to natural areas. Next slide, please. The last VAP goal, the accessible and safe goal, is about holistically expanding access to ensure all patrons can use district amenities and programs. As a result of the goals you see here, THPRD may work to develop additional accessible and gender neutral changing spaces and showers, provide shade and cover in parks and play areas, and expand financial assistance programs. Next slide, please. I will let Aisha take us forward from here.
So though we made it through the vision action process with a tremendous amount of great information, when we thought about what other elements would complement the 4 goal areas defined through the vision action plan, what we were looking for were really those foundational things that a park and recreation agency like THPRD needs to have in place in order to deliver on those 4 goal areas. And so when we took that initial look at what all the action items were, what the goal areas were, we came up with 3 additional goals that we wanted to explore in terms of setting the stage with our comprehensive plan, delivering on our vision. And those 3 additional kind of cross-cutting throughout the district areas were diversity, equity, inclusion and access, technology and innovation, and financial sustainability. So one of the things that I think we'll talk about in a little bit here is just as we've evolved and as we've moved through this process, we've gathered information from internal staff teams, from you all, from our community, and from our joint advisory committee. And so one of the other things that we've really talked about is we have a play for everyone, and we have an accessible and safe goal area. And now we also have diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, and we have preserving natural spaces. What we've heard and what we're in the process of conforming into this comp plan is that we need to better differentiate between some of the cross-cutting elements that you see on the slide here with some of those initial goal areas that we came up with. We also heard that we needed to put a little bit more emphasis, maybe beyond the realm of preserving natural spaces. It's really leaning into the value of environmental stewardship. And so one of the changes we anticipate is maybe moving that preserving natural spaces goal area away from just that specific element, but expanding it to include things like our climate action planning work. And so this is the refinement phase that we find ourselves in now. So on the next slide, I'll talk through what we're thinking in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. And this is really integral work that we need to support all of the ongoing action and accountability that dismantles oppressive systems and practices within THPRD, within all governmental entities. So as a result of the objectives and goals of this DEAI goal, we may want to work to acquire land in historically underserved areas of the district that would improve our level of service to patrons within the area, and also increase our staff diversity through programs like our Diversify internship program, which you see our advertising materials for here on the slide. So this is intended to be maybe more of the internally focused systems that we're building to enhance DEIA within THPRD, while our welcoming and inclusive goal is more the externally focused one. So we anticipate doing some additional work as we move through this next refinement phase to better differentiate between those 2 goal areas. The next slide talks about our technology and innovation. And this is the area where we know that there are things that our community needs from us to better meet their needs. So an example of this is about improving our service delivery, improving our maintenance practices and our business processes that are engaging and responsive to our community's needs. So as a result of these efforts, what we may find is that we're creating a screening process for pilot programs. So as we try new things across the district, we're trying to be responsive to the trends we see in the world of recreation. So how do we measure those? How do we determine whether the pilot has been a success or not? We are also spending energy, time, effort, and in updating our financial system. And you know that this has been a long-standing process and will continue for us. And this is also where we look at making changes to our registration system ultimately, trying to remain on the right wavelength to get the information out to folks and to get them to engage with us appropriately. On this next slide, we'll talk about financial sustainability. And so I think some of you have seen this particular graphic before. It is something that was developed as part of our 2013 Comprehensive Plan update, and it existed within our Service and Financial Sustainability Plan. This was a concerted effort with our community to talk about where things should fall within our pricing structure, essentially. What are the things that are mostly community benefit, like having open and free and safe parks and trails to use, fell into that lowest tier, tier 1, where there's not an expectation of any sort of financial recovery of the costs to do those things. On the other hand, at the top of the pyramid, you see mostly individual benefits. Somebody wants to rent the nature center for a wedding reception, they're going to pay a higher cost to reflect the fact that this is exclusive use for their purposes. So we have this framework. It's something that we anticipate in this next round of a comp plan we need to update. So this would be a part of our process and likely a finding that we put into our strategic plan, saying that within the next 3 to 5 years, we would be updating this information as we move through. So financial sustainability just as a whole, we can't serve the public if we can't keep all of our financial work in order. So this is a foundational element that wasn't something that the public would tell us during our vision action planning work, but it's absolutely critical for us to be able to continue to serve the community. So on the next slide, we have a few questions for you, and I'll let Peter talk you through what we're asking tonight.
Thanks, Aisha. So staff gathered feedback on the draft goals and objectives and guiding principles at the April 27th Joint Advisory Committee meeting. And we asked the committee members the same 2 questions that you see here. Based on the presentation, what we heard from the Joint Advisory Committee was that modifying VAP goal language is acceptable in order to highlight important issues such as environmental sustainability and climate resiliency. And as Aisha mentioned before, that's something that we're exploring with that preserving natural spaces goal. Expanding that to better highlight those key issues that are facing our community in the future, in addition to keeping the focus on natural areas. And then second, we heard that we should explore more ways to make goals distinct from one another. And that was really led into that work of trying to differentiate better between our welcoming and inclusive goal and our DEIA goal, focusing one more externally and one more internally. So we're eager to gather your feedback on these questions. Next slide, please. Here are the comp plan goals. Just as you mull those questions over, I'm going to put the 2 questions that were on the previous slide in the chat so that you have them as a reference, and would really love to hear what you think. So would like to open the floor.
So as a reminder, the third item on the screen, preserving natural spaces, is one that we are contemplating expanding to reflect the district value of environmental stewardship. And we think that that will hit all of the protection of our natural spaces, but also the things like converting our fleet to electric vehicles and other elements of stewardship of our environment. So that is one thing that we do definitely want to hear your thoughts on if you'd like to share them.
Felicia?
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'm wondering how we define safety, and I guess I'm struggling at that word in a good way because it seems so big. Um, I know that's a large question. I apologize.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a really broad category, and the VAP talks about it super broadly. So there's everything in there from involving the community more in taking ownership of the security of parks, and that's sort of like more eyes on parks, more activity, to things like lighting trails, especially trails that are heavily used by commuters, exploring how we do that, and also exploring safety through design, making sure that we have appropriate fall zones on all of our play equipment. I know that design and development is already really keyed into that, but it is a super broad category. So we can definitely look at ways to make that a little more concrete.
I appreciate that, and I even appreciate your examples of the lighting trails because I know that that's come up so many times and how that aligns with our values for nature, and it gets really complicated, which is the art of our jobs. No, that was helpful. Thank you.
Anybody else have any opinions yet? Barbie?
Yes, I'll just add some comments here of positive feedback. Really appreciate the intentional work here. I think everything makes sense in terms of incorporating feedback and really just sharpening those other areas that, again, the public may not be thinking of because it's more internal facing. In particular, I just really want to give kudos and shout out to the distinction, especially around our welcoming and inclusive. So number 1 there and number 5. And I will just offer a anecdotal experience with my son, who forever has gone to summer camps at Conestoga and Cedar Hills and Garden Home. And when he first had a camp counselor at Conestoga that looked like him, the summer experience that he had was incredibly, remarkably different. And so though that is an internal facing element to say, hey, we're working to look at how we can make our own internal environment with our staff more inclusive and more diverse. One hand rinses the other, because that's how we do show up and become welcoming and inclusive to the external community as well. So I just want to give a special shout out in that distinction, and just share that really does warm my heart. And I'm always just so inspired by the intentional work and really reacting to what the board has put forth as our values and leaning into those values. So thank you for the tremendous work here.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, just I can go while everybody else is thinking. As far as I know you guys are looking for focusing regarding that, preserving natural spaces with the environmental stewardship stuff. But as far as when the vision plan was made and that section of preserving natural spaces was carved out, were the comments that we received from the public about like climate change, kind of like, technology advances and stuff, or was it specifically, like purchasing spaces for like our critters and like for greenery and those kinds of things? I guess I don't know if we can clarify.
Sure. Well, as Peter mentioned, with the accessible and safe goal area as well, these are pretty broad ideas. And so the process that we've gone through to take the 108 ideas into what we're trying to develop guiding principles around and guidance on is that we're trying to provide a little bit more information about those things. So in the vision action plan, in the preserving natural spaces, that is where kind of the climate resiliency elements carried forward too. So one of the items is be a leader in responding to climate change. So so we definitely felt that that made sense within there. And I'm not sure if Holly wanted to add anything specific to this, having led the charge with the Vision Action Plan, but the conversation that we had following the last joint advisory committee meeting in which we talked about these ideas was that I think she expected that there would be an evolution as we moved through this. And by hearing from hearing from the joint advisory committee members, that they really saw a need to put a fine focus on what preserving the natural areas meant, but also, you know, in expecting that it would cover these other areas. I think that was something that she anticipated would happen. So I see that she's turned her camera on and perhaps wants to add some more eloquent thoughts than I have just tried to share.
I don't think I could ever be more eloquent than you, Aisha. But what I will say is keep in mind what Aisha and Peter are talking about is the comp plan. So we're not going to change the goal area in the vision action plan. That language will stand, but it makes a lot of sense in the comp plan, which is a policy driven document. You know, it's a document that guides, it's an organizing principle of how we are organizing ourselves as an organization, how we're leading the ideas in the comprehensive plan into all of our functional plans. It makes sense that at that point we would take ideas we heard from the vision action plan and perhaps broaden them, right? Like the public might have focus areas, but there's more that we need in a comp plan, and that makes a lot of sense to me. So I thought the suggestion that came out of that joint advisory discussion made a lot of sense. I think aligning it with the board value around environmental stewardship makes a lot of sense. And I also think, you know, it's all time and place. I think the makeup of the folks that were working on that area and how we summarize the comments are probably really rooted in what people understand of THPRD today, right? And probably really more focused on those natural area spaces. But it is really great, and it's a great moment to broaden it and make sure that we're setting our comp plan up to lead us into the future, aligned with our board and our organizational values, and really thinking broader into the future about how we want to manage environmental stewardship overall. So it makes a lot of sense to me.
Is there not a reason why we wouldn't just call it out as its own thing rather than lump, right? Like preserving natural spaces to me is just like where it's kind of like part of our comp goal of like of purchasing all these properties or purchasing all these places and stuff like that. And then like the environmental stewardship, I mean, like when you guys talked about, you know, like the electric vehicle stuff, in my head that falls into like technology and innovation. But or you know, like we call it financial sustainability, which should be done like throughout every single one of these comp plan goals, right? So is there a reason why we wouldn't just say climate change or environmental stewardship would be its own section rather than pulling into the preserving natural spaces?
Oh, that's exactly what we're saying. I think the next time you see this, you won't, when you see the comp plan goal areas, you won't see the words preserving natural spaces. You'll see environmental stewardship. And then all of those vision action ideas that supported preserving natural spaces will now in the comp plan under the goal label of environmental stewardship.
Gotcha.
And other ideas will be there that we might have missed in the vision action plan. So that's the intent, that we are massaging the wording for the comp plan to that broader wording of environmental stewardship.
Perfect. Okay, got it. And then my other just comment was when we're talking about, you know, welcoming, inclusive, or play for everyone and stuff, I know we do a lot of community engagement and stuff, but what was special about our vision action plan was we went to workplaces where in earlier today when we were talking about creating playgrounds and all those kinds of things, we talked about going to where people are, but are we making a special extra effort to read, because the comments that we receive are places that, you know, like for a park, are people who traditionally use parks are going to give you those comments, but when we want to really get for play for everyone and being welcoming, inclusive, we need to try to figure out how to outreach to those who have been traditionally excluded, right? So that those comments are not there because they're not commenting because they don't have a reason to use whatever we're doing, and so those comments are kind of missed or whatnot. Do we have a way to as we intentionally continue to build either programming, parks, and those kinds of things, to really do a little special effort to get those voices that are traditionally excluded or marginalized, so that we make sure that we are, getting a whole bulk of people that would represent the spaces we're creating.
Of course, my dog is barking right now. Want me to take this minus Sean's?
Yes, please do. Sorry about the barking dog there,
I'm
Holly.
sorry too, y'all. So yes, absolutely. Sherman, well turned. Okay, so this is one of the things. TV timeout.
I think what Holly will share when she comes back is that the vision action plan work was really foundational in setting the new stage for how we want to do outreach within THPRD to the whole community. So there were definitely steps taken to engage with folks that we would not traditionally see, that aren't the frequent flyers in terms of providing input on park developments. And we talked a little bit about that earlier today in work session about, these are the same people. If we do our outreach the exact same way, we're going to be seeing the same people. If we rely on community participation organizations or neighborhood associations, that it's typically the same people that are going to be there. So the vision action plan went way beyond that and has informed how we're doing all of our outreach from now on. So now that Holly's back, I'll let her take over.
I'm sorry, kids got back from a soccer meeting and dog was like, oh, so we're back to normal now. Okay, yes, I'm so excited about the bench that we're developing on community engagement and the partnership with D&D and planning and communications. We've got a great team. We've got Liana Harden, who's like inside D&D, and we've got our bench that we're building in communications that are community engagement experts. And we are looking at all of these things differently. So just by way of an example, right now, y'all have mentioned the work with the city of Beaverton on the downtown park outreach. We have led, so THPRD is leading the community engagement strategy for that. And we've got about 40 different engagement opportunities that we've developed, including 10 different focus groups. And we're working with community engagement liaison services to do specialized language specific, facilitated by leaders in those communities, outreach sessions to get input from marginalized communities on what they'd like to see for parks in the downtown. We've got focus groups with area schools within our Thrive program. We're going out tabling at summer events, both within our calendar, within the city's calendar, and we're doing other focus groups with groups that we didn't get through the cells. So we'll have a focus group with folks experiencing disabilities. We're coordinating with Home Plate and working on a focus group with folks that are, homeless youth that hang around in the Beaverton downtown area. So we are really coming up with, I call it geographic lens. We really look at each project and we look at the attributes of that project. What audiences do we want to reach? What audiences are traditionally missed in those spaces, and how do we connect with those folks? And we're taking a unique approach with every single project. So, your question of how do we get that feedback? Are we getting it for play for everyone? We're doing it at a micro level on every new park design, every new major project that we work on. You're not going to see us have to go out and do a bunch of new outreach on the comp plan. Comp plans are kind of boring to do outreach on, to be honest. I'm sorry. But the vision action plan is like feeding into it. And that's why you do that vision action work. So you've got that good community information to build your policy document on.
Perfect. Thank you. That's wonderful. Anybody else have anything? Barbie, did you have something else, or is your hand just still up? Hand just still up. Okay. So there was 2 questions. Did you guys, I don't know if we can put those 2 questions back up, but I'm assuming maybe you got all that you need, or is there anything else you needed from us?
I think what you've given us is great.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I think what you've given us is great. I placed both those questions in the chat.
Oh, okay.
If you want to take some more time, absolutely, please reach out to myself or Aisha. Would love to get any more feedback as it sort of percolates for you.
And then I think we just have one more slide, which is just a reminder of where we are in our timeline of kind of the overall long-range planning efforts. In the top, you have the comprehensive plan. The star is where we are right now, May 2022. And so we are expecting to be able to bring this back to you later in this fall. And we do anticipate having an update in between now and then to talk to you a little bit more about where things are evolving. We are also moving forward with the development of that strategic plan, which is more of the 3 to 5 year focus. And so you'll have updates from us in upcoming meetings on that. And we're continuing our work on preparing for our reaccreditation through the Commission on accreditation for park and recreation agencies. So that is the longer term view. And that is, of course, our opportunity to ensure that we're keeping up with all the best practices in park and rec across the nation, and that we are a well-run park and rec agency. So this is the big picture. We will continue to come back to you with updates. We thank you for your time tonight, and we'll see you next time.
Perfect. Thank you,
Thank you.
guys. That was wonderful. Okay, I kind of glossed over audience time, and I just want to double check with Jessica or Heidi. We have no verbal or written testimony. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so now we will move on to new business. I think we have Aisha again with.
You bet.
Yes, that's right. So again, Aisha Panis here to talk to you about community gardens. And the actual item in front of you tonight is our intergovernmental agreement with the city of Beaverton for the provision of community garden services. But before we got into that item, what we wanted to do is just to frame this up for you, provide a little bit more context to what we've been talking about with the city of Beaverton. We wanted to provide you just an overview of our current community garden program. So I've invited Jessica Kittleson to join me here tonight, and she is our administrative specialist in the Park Services Division. So she supports planning, D&D, maintenance, nature, and trails. And she is also our chief person in charge of community gardens and works with all of our gardeners and does tremendous work for the district in that arena. So she's going to provide a bit of an update and overview of the program, and then I will take over for the tail end of the presentation to talk to you about the actual request before you tonight. So I will turn things over to Jessica.
Well, thank you, Aisha, for the introduction, and thank you, board members, for having us on the agenda tonight. So I'm going to start with an overview of the program, and the program started in 1998. The location of the garden that was first built is Harmon Swim Center. If you go behind the building there, you'll see that there is a 40-plot community garden, and that I can't say that was the very first part of the garden. It has grown since, but that's number one. And in the time that we've had the community garden program since 1998, we've had 14 additional sites, and that have been installed throughout the district. That totals 405 garden plots, and that means we have 405 individuals, families, community program areas that we have gardening at these spaces. And we have many groups that garden with us as well. We do our therapeutic rec through THPRD at Mountain View Champions Park. And we also have a group called Renovated, which is a nonprofit group that teaches people new strategies in planting that may not be familiar with this growing zone. So it's very important, especially for these types of communities being introduced into the area. And what you'll see at a lot of our gardens is some traditional standard in-ground plots. And you will also find some raised beds, some ADA beds. So we have some accessibility for those that may need a mobility device to get to the garden or just safe ground to walk on. Plot sizes can range from, 2x6 beds or a 4x8 raised bed. But the most common is the 12x12 in-ground plots that you'll see. And we actually have plots that are 15x22. So very large space to garden. The cost for these, we just did a increase in cost this season, and the raised beds for an in-district resident is $28 and goes all the way up to $63 for a larger plot. And for those that are not residing within the district, they will pay just a little bit more, but will be able to reserve the same sort of spaces. So as we move on to the next slide, you will see the locations of the community garden sites. We have 9 sites in the north, and those are indicated by the orange leaf that you can see there. And then, of course, 6 sites in the south, indicated by the green leaf that you see on the map. So we do have a few more gardens in the north than we do south, but we recognize that, and we're moving towards finding a way to balance that out. So on the next slide, I'll be sharing some details on some of the newer sites that we have opened over the past couple of years. And the newest site to the community garden programs are Mountain View Champions Park, and that opened in 2017 when we opened the park itself. Recuerdo Park opened in 2020, and then Pio Pio Park just opened last year. So those are our 3 newest sites. On the next slide, I'll share information about renovated garden sites because we've had all these new sites, but we also have some older sites that we may need to do some upkeep on. So those sites, one of them is Harmon, the oldest site that we have. And over time, we were noticing that because the installation of the garden did not necessarily meet a standard that we have now, is we saw that plots had flowed into pathways and spaces were not well defined for use. So in the fall of 2014, the site received an upgrade. The pathways, as you can see there, they also had to do some fence realignment, so to allow some more walkable spaces around the plots. And this allowed for a lot safer travel through the garden and being able to access both sides of a garden plot as opposed to just one side and having to walk in or maybe move through another person's plot. So it really helped define that area. It cleaned it up a lot, and it was much easier for gardeners and maintenance to maintain the site. Cedar Hills was renovated due to an overall park design. The garden reopened again in 2019 after being, I think, out for about 2 years while the park was being built. The design of the site actually changed quite a bit. Now it includes the well-defined in-ground plots as well as 8 ADA raised beds on a very hardy surface. And now sits along the Walker Road side of the park as opposed to the opposite side of the park where I believe it had been before. On the next slide, there are 2 other sites that have been renovated. And Eichler was renovated in 2019. It was recognized that the condition of the site wasn't so great. It looked very different from a lot of our other sites that had been built. And so the fencing was unstable. The interior and the exterior of the fence were really hard to maintain with the types of, grasses and weeds that were growing there. And then so we decided, hey, let's see what we can do to maintain this site. And so with some grant funding and some capital dollars, Eichler received a very well-needed improvement that includes the in-ground plot borders, the wider pathways, the mow band, which is something that we will attempt to install in any garden moving forward because it really helps maintenance be able to maintain the exterior areas much easier instead of having to string trim up close to the garden. And we also installed a new green waste area at that site as well. And the green waste area is where gardeners can bring their debris and weeds and collect that over time, and maintenance will come pick that up at a later time. So the gardeners were really delighted with the outcome. It looks great in that park, and it's been very well maintained ever since we did the renovation. And then finally, Mountain View Champions Park, although it was a new park garden that had been built, the surface material that was used to begin with was favorable due to accessibility. It looked really nice, but over time we realized that the crushed granite material became very difficult to work with when we had really wet winter going into a very dry summer. The ground would actually turn into a clay, and you couldn't pull a weed. I mean, if you pulled the weed, you'd leave half of it in the ground. So we realized that it was difficult for community gardeners to really maintain the site. And so together with maintenance, we came up with a plan to do some resurfacing to continue to be as accessible as it was when it first opened. So we decided on a compacted crushed gravel around the raised beds and up to the in-ground plots. And then, of course, the bark chips on the backside and in between the in-ground plots. So it really spruced up the overall look of the garden, and I think the gardeners will have a much easier time maintaining the site now that it looks that way. So as we move on to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about our expansion ideas. We know that the gardens are are in high demand, and we want to provide this service to as many community members as we can. Therefore, when a new park is developed, we take a look at the site, we see if it's something that we can possibly incorporate into a park design. And of course, we seek community input. I was recently at a community event at Pointer Road, and there was a lot of comment of this would be a great place for a community garden. So we're like, yes, we want to hear from you. That's very important information. So we definitely love to seek that community input. We also want to recognize how important it is to expand access to community gardening, and that was outlined in the Vision Action Plan. This would include reaching out and working with community-based organizations to increase community gardening access and also education to underserved communities. In addition, we will look for areas that will balance program distribution. So maybe focus not building gardens next to gardens next to gardens, but rather in areas that do not have a garden nearby, such as some of the areas that you may have noticed in the southern part of the district. And on the next slide, we'll see some identified areas of program expansion. And we recognize that there are 6 sites that we could expand, and you'll see that with the red star: Bethany Lake, Schiffler, Harmon, John Marty, POPO, and Ridgewood. So when we look at these sites, these are already developed community garden sites. So with looking at the layout of it, we are able to identify areas where we can expand with the existing layout of the garden. And then there are 2 sites, the blue stars that you see, is where we can possibly reconfigure a site. So Schiffler is one that we can reconfigure. There's a lot of space that's not being utilized. And we can also reconfigure it to add additional either standard plots or raised beds. So that way we can serve more of the community members seeking a community garden plot in that area. And then, of course, there are sites that maybe have larger plots that we could, once a gardener decides to give up their plot, that we could maybe divide the plot and make it into 2 plots. So then we can include another community member, invite another member to garden at the community garden. And then, of course, you'll see the green stars where there's potential new garden sites where we don't have anything. These sites have not been developed or could lend space for a new amenity at an existing park. Wonderland, for example, it's a developed park, but it could potentially include a community garden. So on the next slide, I'll provide just a little bit more information, some really great updates. Thank you for bearing with that big overview, but this is kind of the really fun part, the stuff that we get a lot of feedback on and get to work with the community even a little bit more than just our community gardeners. So in addition to imagining all that expansion, this year we scheduled 42 community garden volunteer events. And this means that anyone in the community can sign up for a community garden event and just come and get their hands dirty and help clean pathways and fence lines and plots if they've been vacated. And so we've had very successful events so far and really great turnout. And we just are excited to continue with that effort. Of course, a very big thank you to volunteer services, staff and volunteers, as well as park maintenance, because they play a big role in these events. The gardens are looking better and better with each event. So when we started this volunteer program, we noticed that we could definitely use some more hands in the garden, and volunteer services has done an amazing job in scheduling these events. So you'll see in the bottom left corner that there is a new looking wed. So we had an Eagle Scout complete a project at John Marty. That's John Marty, and we have 2 gardens that have that split rail fence. And over time, just like any wood fence, the wood can deteriorate and become actually unsafe in some spaces when it can't no longer be held by the original structure. So Eagle Scout Marvin Lynn came and he designed the new split rail fence. went from a three post to a 2-post, and also redesigned the gates, which I think the last time I had seen the gate before the installation was falling off its hinges. So this is a major improvement. So yeah, after all the wear and tear with the lumber, and it's happening on other sides, but this is our access point to the garden. So now we have a safer way for our gardeners to access their plots, and then we will work on finishing the split rail fence at a later date. And also, one of the really interesting things and most exciting things that are happening right now is that we are hoping to hire the first community garden program intern this summer. There's a lot of work to be done. This internship program is intended for students who identify as Black, Indigenous, and/or a person of color. So this intern will assist with a variety of responsibilities, and this can include inventory at sites, what currently exists, what needs to be listed or listed as needing replacement, and that could be plot borders, numbers, hose bibs, fencing, and other projects would be completion of the community garden management plan, which has been in draft form because we've had some changes and some expansions to the program. And then as well as, working with volunteer services to create more events and community projects, which will be really important as we hopefully expand in the future. And then, of course, develop partnerships with food access programs in the area. We noticed that this is really important. We do have a couple of food donation boxes and a program that seemed to be going really well until the pandemic, and now we're just trying to get on a roll again with the food donations. And so the intern would definitely be helpful to coordinate some of that food distribution within the community. So all in all, really great things happening in the community garden program. It's a very busy time. Right now, gardeners are getting into their plots, turning them over. And if you go and visit, you'll see that the tarps are being pulled off and the landscape is being groomed for planting. So June 1st is our date that we will go out and inspect plots, and we'll see that everybody is getting ready to put their summer plantings in. And there's so much more to do as to why an intern would be great, and also the opportunity to do some expansion. So that's my part. I'll give it back to Aisha to provide information on another exciting update and information on an effort with the city of Beaverton. Thank you.
So Aisha, if I could interrupt
Yes,
this briefly, it so happens within our office structure that I have a relative amount of, well, shall we say, overhearing some of Jessica's conversations that she gets to have with a variety of different people in the community. And I will tell you that she is blessed with an enormous amount of patience and grace as she's providing support. Because we have gone through transitions in this program, like only allowing one plot instead of two, little things where, wow, there's a level of possessiveness from some people of, but the end result is, as you can see, within our existing program, and then when you hear from Aisha, we have more coming. Jessica has done a wonderful job with this, and the teamwork engaged with the maintenance side of it. It's really, it's been a fun program to watch over the years. Aisha.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Doug. I see a lot of hand clapping. There might have even been a heart in there, Jessica. I don't recall the last time we brought such a significant update on community gardens to all of you. And so we really wanted to take advantage of this just to let you know about this facet of the many, many things that we do here at THPRD, and wanted to maybe pause for a moment to see if there are any questions before we move into the topic on your agenda tonight. Looks like one hand is up from Felicita.
We can ask questions about the garden stuff.
Please, yes.
Thank you. I really appreciate this. It's so fun. I fall in love more and more with gardening every year, so I love this. Two, I think, quick questions. Can folks use financial aid to purchase a garden plot?
Yes,
Awesome.
they can.
Yay. And then I'm curious about the ADA plots. Are those more expensive to build? Because the first thought I have is like, why don't we build all of them like that? And I'm sure there's something I'm missing. So what am I missing?
Yeah, the lumber, the material is a little bit more expensive. We do have to consider the type of treated wood that we use for that, only because we live in the Pacific Northwest and things expand. And so maintenance has done a really great job coordinating with our design and development team when we are installing these gardens. And that is to make sure that we are using material that will last a long time. And sometimes that just comes at a cost, of course. The in-ground plots that we do install now, there's really only, 4 pieces of lumber, maybe some corner posts to go with that. So they're relatively inexpensive. But with the raised beds, yes, we would love to put more raised beds in. I love how accessible they are to folks that are not only having, just needing a mobility device to get up to a plot, but sometimes we have gardeners that just would rather bend into a plot instead of be lower to the ground. It just is more comfortable and easier. So yes, they are more expensive. However, it's important that we are incorporating these into all of our future sites.
I'm just thinking about multi-generational households
Yes.
and bodies changing, but thank you. This is great. I appreciate your work. I had no idea this was part of your purview. So I also feel really lucky that I got to learn that you do this work. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Heidi?
Quick question. I remember hearing from some community garden neighbors that there were little rodents and pests that would come from community garden area to their homes, sort of adjacent to. Is that something that's sort of a common thing that we hear about? What do we do about it? Of course, those critters are important to the life cycle, so.
They are, although more of a nuisance to many. We do have some sites that we do actually see a lot of that happening a little bit more. Bethany, Southminster, and we offer advice when it comes to a remedy for this type of thing. So I drove by A.M. Kennedy the other day, and because they had rats, somebody had purchased one of those little owls that you put out in your yard or a field to scare creatures away. I don't know if it's working. Yes, a decoy. But so we do our best to support and assist when we have those things. But the reality is that if there's a food source, there will be animals. And I think many of the gardeners have done a really great job on managing that within their own space and then offering support to other gardeners as well. We have some very skilled rat trappers amongst our community gardeners. And as much as I don't want to say that there's, rats in the garden, there's going to be, creatures in the garden. But they really do support each other. I don't actually receive a ton of concern just because I think it's a little bit, it's known that it's a possibility, and we just provide recommendations on how maybe to, how to garden. We say to gardeners that having a less, I guess if you're maintaining your plants throughout the summer months and you're bringing the leaves up off the ground, it's less potential for some animals to get in there and dig, and take your produce away. But and there's other things that people are doing. If there's a mold that pops up, they'll just get one of those little solar noisemakers, that just keep things at bay. So there's no, I think, answer to this to be where it's something that can't happen. Just know that, maintenance staff and myself, we are there to support gardeners and guide them in through ways, maybe couple different options on maybe how to deter things.
Yeah, and I think when I've heard of it, it's been a homeowner that resides adjacent to or close to a community garden. So the complaint is the community garden, yada, yada, yada. The rodents are coming now to my house, the rats or the whatever pests. And so I imagine those complaints are few and far between, but obviously we're doing our best to inform and educate our gardeners as to, best practices and gardening with critters.
Mhm. Yes, and so yes, we hope that they wouldn't be a disturbance or a hindrance on our neighbors. And I do not hear much of that, but
Okay.
of course, we would be happy to discuss that with the
Thank
community.
you, Jessica.
Of course.
Thank you. Sorry, it reminds me just a little bit of our beaver conversations in the past. Rodents, beavers. So thanks for your work, Jessica.
Okay, I think we'll move to the next slide then and talk through where we are with the city of Beaverton. So this idea came about just like 18 months ago, I'd say. And so I want to talk to you about how the conversation started and where we've ended up. So on the next slide, I wanted to share that we were approached by City of Beaverton staff who were interested in seeing if we could provide any help with providing new locations for displaced gardeners to garden. And the reason why they were asking this question of us is because they maintained a garden behind the Beaverton Community Center that they were looking at using in a different way that would preclude the ability to use the garden by the facility. So they were pursuing that, but not wanting to leave the gardeners just absolutely without option. And so the initial ask was, you have a garden program, THPRD. How do people get these plots? And would there be a way for us to connect our gardeners with those plots? So that was the initial ask. And as we moved into that conversation about what that would take, how different are our processes from Beaverton's processes, our fees from their fees, what would that transition look like? We started having a bigger and broader conversation about, are we duplicating services here? Does it make more sense for one entity to run the community gardens across Greater Beaverton? And so that's where the conversation got really interesting. And so we started having regular meetings with Beaverton staff to talk through what this looked like. And we went through a couple of iterations of ideas, and we did some outreach. And one of the things we did was discuss this idea with our Parks and Facilities Advisory Committee. So you should have a letter from them that was supportive of this move. They did identify a couple of concerns, which we think have been resolved through the conversations with Beaverton and have been included in the Intergovernmental Agreement that we're bringing to you tonight. So on the next slide, we will talk a little bit about the outreach that we did as part of this conversation that began with, can you help us find some gardeners new plots? And so one of the things that we talked about was we would like to know more about what our gardeners think about our program. So Jessica worked to develop a survey with help from other internal staff here at the district that was shared with our current gardeners. And concurrently, the City of Beaverton was doing some outreach to their own gardeners at their 3 garden sites. So with our questions, what we were really looking at is how satisfied are folks with the program here at THPRD? We were talking about things like Doug mentioned, the idea that people used to be able to have 2 plots per household. And we were wondering, how does that work? Because at the time we were working on this survey, we had 405 plots, 405 filled plots, and we had a huge number of people on our wait list. Right now, I think we have 150-ish people on our wait list, and we knew we had almost 80 people that had 2 plots. So just making that one potential change could potentially allow us to almost wipe out half of the people on our wait list and be able to provide them with plots. But at the same time, it would also provide us an opportunity to house some of the folks that were being displaced from that Beaverton Community Center site, house them in giving them plots. So we wanted to ask that question specifically about the double plots, but also other questions that we thought would be relevant to our community garden program and any changes that we might want to make. So what we were thrilled to find out was, number one, that we had an incredible, great number of responses, 150. We were pretty excited about that. And we saw that overwhelmingly people were very satisfied with the garden program. When we asked them about the things that they would like to see improved on the program, you can see in the box to the left here in the middle that we heard people wanted more parking. One of the things we were really curious about is how do people get to these gardens? Are they walking in or are they driving in? Seems like maybe they were doing some more driving than walking. They wanted to take advantage of those things like the Waste Not Food Taxi. They wanted to share the produce that they were producing and not able to use at home. They wanted things like the fences cared for. They really liked the idea of communal tools. And so pest control, Heidi, it was a topic that was discussed in the survey. And we talked about the allowing only one plot per household, which was able to allow us to serve more gardeners. And then finally, the adding more raised beds for greater accessibility to anybody who maybe has a little less comfort with crouching down. So we got some really great feedback from this process, and some of the things that we wanted to explore as a result of this outreach were kind of changing up our registration process, how we assign folks to the plots that they're asking for, changing up our timeline, and we had that conversation with the city of Beaverton and how they do theirs. We've already started translating some of our materials into Spanish, which is by far the most spoken language other than English in our service area. And we are in the process of contemplating expansion of our community gardens. And as Jessica mentioned, the expansion of ways to donate excess produce is underway. So we took this information and took this back and had even more conversation with the City of Beaverton staff. And so on this next slide, we'll just wait for that to advance. We really wanted to talk about what it would look like if THPRD was to become the single provider of community garden services. And so what the city had to offer was the remaining 2 of their initial 3 community gardens that are located near the A.M. Kennedy Park and near Stir Center, near Schiffler actually Park. And so we would potentially gain another 109 garden plots that we could then register folks through our system. And so this was the idea. This was the opportunity that we discussed. There were some things that we said would be critical for us to take into account if we were going to take on the responsibility of these gardens. That garden at Kennedy is a big one, and there are big plots, and there's a lot going on. It's well established, and so there's going to have to be a transition period should we take these gardens in, and we needed to have that conversation with them. So next slide, please. So what this ended up coming to was an intergovernmental agreement whereby the city would transfer their remaining gardens at Kennedy and Welch Centennial to THPRD. The timeline that we discussed was the beginning of the fiscal year. In exchange for that, the city wanted to provide both capital funds and operational support funds to the district. And this really reflects that they have rented out their plots for this season. They have taken in those funds. And when they transfer the responsibility of those gardens to us, there's going to be costs that now accrue to us for water in one case and any kind of green waste removal in other cases. So there are expenses that we would incur, and we wanted to be made whole for that we take on until such time as we then receive our own payments for plot fees. What the capital funds were intended to go to was to expand the Schiffler Garden. And what we really saw this as was a win for the overall garden program in the district because it would allow us to improve, similar to the photos you saw in some of those other locations. It would allow us to improve what you see out at Schiffler with regard to the fence boundary, the surfacing that the gardeners walk on, and it would allow us to add some additional garden plots above the grade. And so one of the things that we talked about was there were many raised beds at the Beaverton Community Center garden that have been removed from that site, stored by the city, and the city will now transfer to THPRD subsequent to this agreement's approval that we could reuse and repurpose into Schiffler Park as part of a larger renovation. So that was a critical element. The city does not own the Kennedy Garden project. They actually have an agreement with the church. And so one thing that we would need to also do is to take over the agreement between the church and the city would become an agreement between THPRD and the church. And we have had initial conversations with the church, and they are very interested in exploring that possibility. So we intend to complete that work by the end of this calendar year, should this project go forward. On the next slide, what we are asking tonight is for you to approve the IGA with the city. The city had a similar hearing last night before their council and did vote to approve the IGA with THPRD with the terms that are outlined in the IGA that's in your packets. We would anticipate, if that IGA is approved tonight, that we would do outreach to our community gardeners. We would work to finalize a memorandum of agreement with the church. We would prepare for our registration for the following garden season, which would be this fall, is when the registration period happens. And then I think we would look at a timeline for standardizing our processes and our fees between the two Beaverton gardens and our own, that we would definitely phase in over time. It wouldn't be a brand new, here's the whole new deal. We would find a transition way to make those changes over time so that we would have consistent practices, consistent guidance and fees. So I think that brings our presentation to a close, and we are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions at all? I don't think so. Do I have a motion?
Sorry, I'm happy to make the motion. It's Barbie here. Apologies, I was on mute. I move that the Board of Directors authorize the General Manager or designee to execute an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Beaverton relating to the provision of community gardens.
This is Alfredo. I'll second.
Jessica?
Felicita Monteblanco,
Yes.
Heidi Edwards,
Yes.
Alfredo Moreno,
Yes.
Barbie Minor,
Yes.
Tia Ping.
Yes. All right. I think, Doug, anything else? Or are we good? We're good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, staff, and everyone for being here tonight. We appreciate you staying up late with us. So we will adjourn today and see you guys next month. Thank you.
Thank you.